Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We're back with Russell Moore of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, Alfonso Aguilar of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles, Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce, and Matt Schlapp of the American Conservative Union. Russell, I want to go back to something you said about this locker room talk. When there are indelible moments that are happening here that some conservatives I talk to say we can't get back from. And on this question of character, you've got people saying, you know, what Donald Trump said was just what gets said in any old locker room, normalizing that behavior. I spent a lot of time covering conservatives who talked a lot about character. What happened to the character question?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is that the warnings of the old religious right have actually come true about the coarsening of a culture. I mean, I remember watching Bill Clinton on television dismissing essentially what happened with Monica Lewinsky, even when he admitted to it, and then attacking Ken Starr, and thinking, aren't the Democrats going to be morally outraged by this? And they weren't. Now we're seeing a situation where you have horrific talk about sexual assault and boasting and glorying in these things, which again isn't a one-off. This has been happening for a long time in the way he's been talking. And you see people trying to dismiss it as just locker room talk, or this is alpha male, as one person said. This is just the way that men talk. I'm hearing from a lot of women who are horrified, not just about what happened with Donald Trump. They know what Donald Trump is about, but by leaders who are silent or who are dismissive about this. I think that, forget what's happening in this election, that is going to have a long-term implication for the rest of the country.
Tammy, address that idea of leaders being silent, but then also Donald Trump has talked about his accusers. I mean, he's used some pretty tough words about those accusers and then evaluated them on their attractiveness, which seems to be the thing that got him in the trouble in the first place.
Yeah, it's really good we're not electing a husband or a boyfriend, isn't it? You know, we're electing a president who's, I look at him actually as if you're in the ambulance and you're going to the trauma center and there's a trauma surgeon. I'm not particularly going to care how that person's going to be speaking. That person is going to get you to be able to live another day, to be able to get out of that emergency room, to be able to function the next day. Now look, I can tell you that the Obamas probably have the best marriage since the Reagans in the White House. Mr. Obama clearly does not offend anyone when it comes to the nature of how he speaks about women or people. This nation is now going down the drain. And while I would prefer to have President Reagan back, we don't. So what I'm looking at is I'm voting for President Trump, for Mr. Trump, for the thousands of women who deserve to not be murdered, as an example, by one of the 1.2 million illegal criminals, illegal alien criminals in this nation. There is violence. It's about economic freedom. It's about the jobs. Again, I mentioned earlier the 3.7 million women in poverty now since Obama became president. So yes, of course we would prefer fabulousness at every level. For Mr. Trump, I prefer to be offended by him on occasion than be left for dead by Hillary.
John, we keep going through this question about what is somebody who believes in strong traditional values in the culture. I agree so much with what you said about the fact that what we said was going to happen in the culture has happened in the culture. But when I talk to people of faith, first of all, they're completely offended by the emails that were released about them mocking Catholics and Christians. That was reprehensible, and we should cover that more. But second of all, Christians are no longer necessarily saying we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. We're going to bring back traditional marriage. We're going to have prayer in the classroom. We don't even talk about prayer. You know what they want, John? They want to be left alone with their First Amendment rights to be able to practice their faith fully on in the job, in their home, in the raising of their children. Forcing nuns to buy contraception and these strange permutations that the Obama-Clinton policies have us in have Christian voters of faith in a different position. They will support, in many cases, not all cases, someone like Donald Trump because they think he will stand up and fight.
But look, I think it's more complicated than that. And look, inside the Beltway, I hear a lot of strategists say this is a binary choice. You know, if you want Hillary Clinton and all her bad policies, the Supreme Court being controlled by liberal judicial activist judges, then you know you have to vote for Trump. But the truth is, in America, different from other countries. This is not Italy, where you have Silvio Berlusconi doing something, you know, and with women, and then his poll numbers go up. This is America, and character counts. We've always considered character as paramount. The President of the United States is a moral reference. So yes, I'm appalled at Hillary Clinton, her scandals, her lies, but we have to vote. But to choose Donald Trump just because he's the anti-Hillary, I just think that a lot of us are going to come out and just leave that part of the ballot blank. Look, we had too many candidates in this primary. Despite our differences, the frustration here is that despite our differences, we know that if we had a serious candidate, we should be winning this election with all the scandals, everything that's coming out of WikiLeaks. Her candidacy would have been derailed.
Russell, if I'm a Republican, and a lot have broken with the nominee after this tape came out, who is taking the moral position, the better moral position? The person who says, I have a fixed set of standards, these break those, I won't support that person? Or the person who says, I'm going to support Donald Trump, he's the nominee of my party, and I'm pledged to the party, and therefore I'm going to submit him? Who has the moral high ground?
Well, I can understand the person who's wrestling with his or her conscience and saying, I'm going to choose one or the other of these because of a lesser of two evils approach. I don't agree with that, but I can understand why someone would do that. I think that's very different than the people who are standing up and saying, well, we're not electing a pastor, we're not electing a Sunday school teacher, we're not electing a choir boy, we're electing someone who is simply going to be as mean and as tough as possible, and to act as though we fight lack of integrity and character with more lack of integrity and character. I think that is going to have
look, we can't avoid the fact that
directly to my comment, though, about who we're electing. When you talk, I think it is important to think about women and character when we move forward. But when we talk about the issue about jobs, about the nature of who's going to build up the business in this country, the issue of regulations, of taxes, that is, you want to talk about an assault on women? The assault on women is destroying small businesses, having women live in their parents' basement until they're 30, the destruction of health care, our hospitals and doctors. So this does matter. And it is about hiring someone at this point, because we're in an existential battle for the future. So for every woman watching who's making a decision, yes, vote with women in mind and vote with the future in mind for yourself and your daughters, because this is the character that matters. It's surviving so that we can continue the greatness of the country.
Matt, let me set the question up, taking what Tammy said, is that the charge I hear is that these don't happen in silos. That when you don't respect the boundaries on the character front, your ability to solve things in just the way Tammy suggests is actually also eroded. That was the claim that's been made in other character instances. So why isn't that the case
I'm
here?
with the doctor on this. I think that your character matters, and I don't think you can kind of privatize your character. And I think it does permeate to what kind of president you're going to be. And what I know and what I've seen of Donald Trump is he's somebody who looked at the last 7.5 years of Barack Obama, and he woke up and got a lot more serious, and he realized his country was going down the drain. And I think he's lived a big, flamboyant life, and I'm sure he's done tons of things we would all object to. But the fact is this, as he says, he is who he is. With the Clintons, let's just be honest. They say 2 for 1. She says Bill Clinton will run the economy. He was impeached. They were dead broke because they paid $850,000 to Paula Jones. They paid over $1 million in fines and settlements and fees. He was disbarred. He wasn't allowed to go to the Supreme Court.
And she's
the idea that the
bragging.
Clintons would make the moral case and the character case is absurd, and I think many voters realize that.
It's not a choice, it's standard.
But she's bragging in the WikiLeaks about the importance of being two-faced.
And
private and a public.
I agree
it's
completely
extraordinary.
on the Clintons, but if this is more serious on the Trump side, then I think many Americans are saying, what have we come
But
to?
the
I'm afraid we're
Obama
gonna
marriage
have to-
and character disputes that about the nature of what's going to save this country, and perhaps, even just for 4 years, the steps we need to take to right her.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank our panelists, and we're going to talk next about hacking and emails and all the other news in the political world. Stay with us. And we've assembled an all-star panel this morning to talk politics. Maureen Dowd is a New York Times op-ed columnist for the New York Times, and her new book out is called The Year of Voting Dangerously. Bob Woodward's latest book is The Last of the President's Men. John Meacham is the author of Destiny and Power, and he's the executive editor at Random House, and David Ignatius is a columnist for the Washington Post. John Meacham, I want to start with you about a piece you wrote in the New York Times about the difference between George Herbert Walker Bush, about whom you've written, Destiny and Power, and the current Republican nominee.
Yeah.
There's a big difference in a pretty short time period.
To paraphrase Henry Adams, the movement from George H.W. Bush to Donald Trump disproves Darwin. It's a remarkable descent. Whether you agreed or disagreed with George H.W. Bush politically, he was a figure of enormous public grace and dignity and empathy. He knew how to play politics. He knew how to hire tough people. He ran a tough campaign in 1988, so this is not a case for St. George of Kennebunkport. What it is a case for is that this is a man who when confronted by the vicissitudes of politics, he almost always did the right thing and tried to put the country first.
Bob, what do you make of where we are right now? You've got Donald Trump out there talking about a rigged election with 23 days to go before. How do you see Trump in the sweep of history?
Well, I frequently disagree with John, but I agree on this. I mean, this is an amazing, appalling election, and you know, the idea that we are reduced to the discussion of when did he grope and who did he grope and what did he grope is absurd, and it is a true shame for the voters that people are not getting answers to questions like, how might you use military force? What's the job of the CIA? How would you organize your White House? How do you keep from letting the White House become a bunker with an isolated president? Those things don't come up.
Maureen, you covered Bill Clinton, and you know you're watching this unfold. Donald Trump responded to his accusers by calling them sick, by suggesting one of them wasn't attractive enough for his attentions. How do you see this?
Well, it's funny because Bob said to me once, we went to the premiere of the movie Nixon, and he said that every president gets the psychoanalyst he deserves. So, but now the whole country has become psychoanalysts. We're all trying to analyze Trump's behavior. And he brought, you know, some women who were Bill Clinton accusers and sat them in front of Hillary Clinton for the debate, which I think was one of the most bizarre things any of us have ever seen. And his argument was that they hadn't, you know, been treated as credible enough. And then when he has this cascade of women accusing him, he just suddenly, you know, begins trashing them and saying they can't be believed. And he doesn't understand, there's no logic in Trump world. He lives in his own alternative universe where logic doesn't apply. And as one of his good friends said, Donald does as Donald wants.
David, I want to ask you about this question of Russian hacking and the emails, the other story we've been talking about today. First of all, what does the U.S. government think about what's actually happened, the connection between the Russian government and what we've seen coming out of it, WikiLeaks?
Since July, which is when the first evidence that the Russians had hacked the Democratic National Committee surfaced, there's been a big debate within the Obama administration about how best to respond. And after a lot of back and forth, the decision was made, we need to state as much of what we know publicly as we can. So a week ago, we had a formal statement by the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnston, essentially accusing Russia of having stolen these emails and then put them into our political debate in an election year for the purpose of destabilizing it. Then on another network show today, we have the Vice President, Joe Biden, taking it a step further and saying that we intend to send a message to the Russians through our actions not to do this ever again. And when he's pressed, he kind of smiles and says he hopes the public won't know about it, implying that this will be covert action. I'm told this morning by government officials that no action has yet been taken by the United States. There were some stories out immediately after the first accounts of what Biden said, suggesting that it had already begun. Apparently it hasn't. And they're still debating what will be most efficacious. What do you do that deters the Russians without hurting yourself even more in the process? So, John, I think that debate will continue. I think they want to prevent the Russians from doing even more in this last month of the election.
Bob, I've been talking to Clinton officials, and they bring up the word Watergate. And so
Yes.
I ask you, they say, if Nixon had said, oh, this is great what they've found by breaking in, and I'm going to use this in my campaign, it would have been pretty shocking. They say people should be equally shocked at the Trump campaign using to good benefit the findings of this hacking process.
Well, but that Watergate was a domestic crime, clearly a crime. In this case, it's espionage, at least at this point. But I think you still have to look at what the emails tell us. And I by no means have read them all, but I've read some. And there was one where Hillary Clinton's chief speechwriter sent to Cheryl Mills, the chief of staff in the State Department, saying, oh, Hillary's changing her position on the Keystone pipeline, and let's leak that so she won't have to say it herself publicly. Now, this is this culture of concealment, the failure to have straight talk, and it's quite likely Hillary Clinton's going to win and be the next president. I think the question becomes, for her and for voters, is she going to be able to govern? You talk to lots of people who are her supporters, and they say, you know, she may be elected but will be a weak president. And part of this is she's got to kind of face, and this isn't just about Trump, it's about her. Majority of the people distrust her, and she can't walk away from that question.
Maureen, did you, in these emails, when you see what Bob's talking about, the XL pipeline, trade, other things where they're shifting and shading, trying to hide her or divert, does that look to you like politics as usual, what we see in all administrations, or is this something that's particular with the Clinton administration or Clinton folks?
Well, it's hard because the crazy transgressions of Donald Trump kind of, relatively speaking, make this seem minor. I think it would have been more lethal during the primary. But the part, to me, that's almost poignant is Hillary Clinton has been trying for 25 years to show who she is to the public and getting memos from her staff. So we see the same memos from her staff now that she got in '92 saying in '92 it was we're gonna have a spontaneous, they're always scripting spontaneity, right? So we're going to have this spontaneous moment where Bill and Chelsea surprise you on Mother's Day. So now we have Neera Tanden sending one saying, we're going to have like an end of summer party where you'll groove to the music. She can groove to the music and she can have a beer. And, you know, it's just kind of sad. They have off the record answers sort of scripted out for her for reporters with the cue to smile.
Right.
You know, it's sad.
John, let me ask you a question about governing versus campaigning. So in campaigning, you want candidates to be as straight as possible. There is a case that Hillary Clinton tried to make in one of the Goldman Sachs speeches that there should be a distance between the public position you have and the private in order to, when you're trying to make deals. You've written about a lot of presidents. Is she right about that?
Absolutely, she's right. I mean, this is not a new political insight. You know, we can go to Machiavelli and go even farther back. Politics is the art of the possible. It's about personal manipulation in many ways. Thomas Jefferson would try to tell the person he was talking to, signal the person he was talking to that he agreed with them and he was going to take the best of what they said and try to put it with this other idea that wasn't so great from the other guy, and maybe we can get there. And so, you know, we live in a nation that is better off because Lyndon Johnson could do that, because Ronald Reagan could do that to some extent. So there's always a public and a private face. The problem right now is, with 23 days to go, you have a woman for whom, if this election were entirely a referendum on Trump, it would be over. But as Bob says, it is also a referendum on her, and that's why it's so close.
And David, your thoughts about these emails, having covered Washington for a while?
Well, the emails are interesting. I have to be honest, I find political embarrassment in them. I find characteristics of her closed, tight, scripted political personality, which is familiar to us. I haven't found yet anything I'd call scandal. And on the question, is she a fundamentally dishonest person? She certainly is a closed person, but we're looking at seeming world-class dishonesty by the Republican candidate Donald Trump. So I'd make that distinction. The final point: we don't know what else is going to come out from these emails and leaked things in the last month.
20 seconds, Bob.
I mean, that's exactly right. We don't know, and if these people, WikiLeaks or whoever's behind it, can hack John Podesta, my God, getting to Hillary Clinton's emails, as the FBI now has told us, there are 14,900 that were not turned over that have gone to the State Department. So, keep your seatbelts on.
Right, yes, 23 more days and more disclosures. Thanks to all of you. When we come back, we'll go in depth with our Battleground Tracker. Stay with us. And we're back with more from our Battleground Tracker and CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvanto. In addition to the 6-point lead Hillary Clinton has now opened up in the 13 battleground states, our tracker has her up 6 points in the state of Nevada. And in Utah, Donald Trump is ahead with 37% of the support. Third party and other candidates total 32%, and Hillary Clinton has 20% support. Anthony, let's talk about the Trump tapes first and the effect those have had on our polling.
Yeah, we're now on track for what may be one of the biggest gender gaps we have ever seen, and that is the difference between how women vote and how men vote. This swing towards Hillary Clinton overall is driven almost entirely by the women's vote. But what's really notable is you go inside, and number one, you see a drop among Donald Trump's support with Republican women. So he's now lost ground among the very people that he needed at this point to start winning. And you start to see a little bit of a closing off in that 9 in 10 of the women who find the tapes offensive now say they won't consider him. So that puts a bit of a barrier there going forward.
And that was a group he needed. Is that what's behind? That's clearly what's behind some of the defections from him, from other Republicans. What do rank and file and Republicans feel about those Republicans who've bolted from Donald Trump?
They think they're motivated by politics and not by principle. And you know, this is a larger theme that we've seen throughout this year, where the rank and file Republicans who elected Donald Trump to this nomination don't care much what the party leadership thinks. In fact, even in this survey, they say that they think Donald Trump looks out for people like them more than they think the Republican Party represents them.
Right, and that's the point Tammy was making earlier. You spent some time in Utah this week. Why?
Because Donald Trump is underperforming what a Republican typically does in reliably Republican Utah. And one of the big reasons out there is that conservative voters do not like him personally. People of the Mormon faith in particular think that, you know, he as a person, they give him much lower ratings than Republicans and conservatives do across all the battleground states.
Quickly, 20 seconds left. Republicans, you've talked about women who may be closed off to Donald Trump. Is he having trouble inside of his party in other ways?
He is down with Republicans overall. It's those Republican women, it's those Republican moderates that he is not capturing. And what makes that hard is that this is a point where you really needed to be, any Republican needed to be closing ranks and then growing from there. 9 in 10 feel like he's not even trying to win their vote because they like him on the economy and they like him on defense, but that's not what they say they're hearing.
All right, Anthony Salvanto, thanks so much as always, and we'll be back in a moment. That's it for us today. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.